Hello, everyone. This is criminal profiler Pat Brown. And on the heels of the 60 Minutes Australia show coming out about the, quote, new evidence in the case of JonBenet Ramsey, that's going to break the case open. The link of my previous video on that is below. And there's a book coming out also. So, there's always a book coming out when there's a show coming out. But the main issue that's being pushed yet again is the unknown DNA present at the crime scene. And John Ramsey and his team and the media constantly claim that this DNA has great meaning and relevance to the crime scene. And I want to talk to you about this so you can understand what touch DNA is and how relevant it really is in this crime, or if it isn't relevant at all. Because there's a lot of nonsense going on, and I want to make it very clear, very simple, without too much scientific talk in there that will bore everybody to death. I have linked a few articles below on the DNA results. Go read them if you want all the little details, because it's quite confusing unless you understand DNA analysis. But I will explain to you the most important things about this. One, JonBenet Ramsey was clearly assaulted, garroted, and killed. But there was never proof of a sexual assault at that time. There were claims from analyses that she may have had sexual assault in the past, but there was no proof that a sexual assault occurred on that particular night. This is important because when we're looking at a sex predator, a child sex predator, usually that kind of thing is included. But we do not have evidence of that. And so we don't have evidence of a sexual assault. We don't have any evidence of semen from a sexual assault. Now, how important is that? Well, obviously, semen would prove a sexual assault. But in this case, semen would have provided solid DNA that could be easily matched to somebody at some point in time. But that does not exist in this case. The only thing we have is touch DNA. Now, let me quickly explain to you what touch DNA is. Touch DNA is it's a tiny little cells that are easily transferred through touching, hence the name touch DNA. And it isn't just one touch that does it. I can go to a party and shake hands with a couple gentlemen. I can go home and pick up JonBenet's clothing and transfer both of those gentlemen's DNA onto the clothing through me. DNA can be transferred, touch DNA, through the children playing. JonBenet went to a Christmas party. She's playing with tons of children. Children slobber on each other. They lick each other's lollipops. They snot. They do all kinds of unpleasant children-like things. And in doing so, things get on children's hands, and JonBenet can pull up her underwear, and that can go into her underwear. It can go onto her body, and then it can transfer from one piece of material to another piece of material to another piece of material. It's that easily transferred. So the problem we have with this case is that we only have touch DNA. And therefore, because the touch DNA could have happened before JonBenet got killed. In other words, everybody who was associated with JonBenet coming in contact with her personally, or her parents, or another kid who then came in contact with her, could be all kinds of stuff transferred. It could be if it was laid down on a floor during the assault, something on that floor could have transferred at that point in time. It's that questionable as to where the actual touch DNA is coming from and at what point. Also, after JonBenet was killed, then you have more transfer that can happen when her body is picked up, moved, when EMTs roll in, detectives roll in, when they start examining in the lab, there's contamination. And that contamination did happen in this case, and they tried to rule out where the contamination could have come from and rule out those actually came from corpses, and they checked all the corpses' DNA to see if it matched, and none of the corpses' DNA did match, so they believed the contamination didn't cause the DNA the touch DNA in JonBenet's case. But you see, it comes from everywhere, everywhere. All right. And before I go on, I want to give you one quick example of how dangerous this can be. There was a man who was a wealthy man who was walking in a park. He got murdered. They did the DNA tests and they found touch DNA that matched a guy in CODIS. And that guy was a vagrant, some guy in the area who just, homeless guy. And they were sure this was the guy. Obviously, his DNA was on the dead guy, right? Turned out the homeless guy was in the ICU at the time. Lucky for him, because what actually happened was the paramedics that brought him to the ICU were also the ones that attended the murder victim. And they transferred the touch DNA from the homeless guy to the murder victim. Thank God that was figured out. And the guy was actually in the ICU at the time of the murder, or he probably would have gone down and be put in prison for the rest of his life, because touch DNA would have proven he was the guy. That's how careful we have to be about touch DNA. Now, let's talk about the specific touch DNA in this case. There's touch DNA from her fingernails and from her clothing, and I believe also from the garrote. Read all the reports. What you come up with, if you read all the reports, is basically this. There is at least 2 unidentified male DNAs and 1 unidentified female DNA. JonBenet's DNA is all over the place. And on her nightgown, there's Burke's DNA and Patsy's DNA. So, there's other DNA there and a lot of JonBenet's touch DNA. However, the unknown, they're all mixes, by the way. They're not clear, separate DNA profiles. They're mixes. And in those mixes, they found her DNA and some element of, some markers of 2 unidentified males and perhaps a third one. So I was having a little trouble trying to figure out if that's what they meant. 2 or 3 unidentified males and 1 unidentified female. All right, now let's take a look at that. According to some people, if JonBenet was attacked in the home by a stranger and the family had nothing to do with it, if you believe all the DNA profiles came from the scene, you have a gang in there. 2 or 3 guys and a woman came in and killed JonBenet that night. Of course, that's ridiculous. So then one has to admit, logically, that not all touch DNA belongs to that exact scene, and not to the crime. So just because you have 2 to 3 to 4 unidentified DNAs from touch DNA doesn't mean any of those people were at the scene, does it? As a matter of fact, we could pretty much assume, I don't want to assume, but let's say, hypothetically say, that the female is unlikely to have been at the scene. So let's go to 2 to 3 guys. Let's take away one of the guys, because I'm not sure about that, how that mixes in. Let's go to 2. There's at least 2 unidentified DNAs. Did 2 guys enter the house and commit this crime, or did only 1 guy? And if 1 guy entered to commit the crime, again, we have the other DNA is meaningless. So what is the chance that that 1 DNA that people are pointing to is from the killer actually has any meaning more than those other unidentified DNAs? You see how that works? So people will go, well, the other 3 may be meaningless, but not that one. Why can't all 4 be meaningless? It gets real questionable then. All right, so let's go to the DNA that's the unknown DNA. Now, there are people out there who have been viciously attacking, what's his name? I'm going to look over here. Fleet White, I think, was he the Santa Claus guy? They think Fleet White killed JonBenet. They think Linda Hoffman Pugh, the housekeeper, was involved in the death of JonBenet somehow. She knew the house. They both knew the house and all this kind of stuff. However, their DNA was tested and it didn't match any of those DNAs. As a matter of fact, what's even more interesting is that in the entire circle of the Ramsey friends and community, anybody the police knew had some connection to them, their DNA has been tested, and not one person in their community, in their circle, in their sphere, not one matches. So what does that tell us? Now, by the way, I don't know if they tested every child that she ever played with, and their parents and the cousins and all that. I don't know how far they went, but in the sphere of the people around the Ramseys, nobody matched. So what does that leave us with? If the DNA does have something to do with the crime, then it would have to be a stranger. And this is what John Ramsey is pushing. It was a stranger. Even John Ramsey hasn't been accusing his friends of killing his daughter. And sometimes families will do that. They're like, if they'll, well, I think it's this guy that I work with. I think it's my friend over here. I think it's my housekeeper. Whatever. They'll go after people they know in desperation to solve the case. The Ramseys have not gone after the people they know. John Ramsey says it is a stranger, and yet the strangers so far that have been had their DNA tested against the unknown DNAs, the unknown male DNAs, nothing has matched. Okay, so here is the problem about the stranger DNA. If one says it is the stranger, it is a stranger, not anybody involved in the family. No, none of the family members were involved in what happened to JonBenet. If it was absolutely a stranger, you would have to believe that some stranger who is not close to the Ramsey family somehow became obsessed with her or saw her in some way and decided, rather than grab a child who's really easy to grab, like we're talking about a child sex predator, right? A child walking home from school alone, a child at a playground, a child who has drug addicts for parents who aren't paying attention, children of prostitutes who are out working and leaving the kid alone. There's a ton of little children a sex predator can go after, rather than a well-known child from well-known parents in a big fancy house. That takes some balls. And most child sex predators don't have any of those, okay? Except physically, but they don't have them. That's why they're sneaky little creatures. But for somebody to say, okay, I want that child. Okay, the parents are there. The parents are in the home. They're in the home. I'm going to get into that house. Now, how they knew how to get into the house is a question. There is no actual proof anybody entered the house from the outside. Supposedly the alarms weren't working, so that would make it easier, but still, they'd have to get into the house. Now, this is a person who does not know the layout of this very massively huge house. They have to wind their way through the house in search of JonBenet, knowing that the parents are in the house. And maybe another child, which there was, the older brother. He could have run into anybody at any time, but he opens up all the doors looking for JonBenet, and then finally, oh, Eureka, there she is, lucky me. All right, now he's got to do something to JonBenet. Well, here's what child predators usually do. They incapacitate the child somehow. We hear about the stun gun thing, which I don't buy. But okay, let's say he puts his hand over the child's mouth, puts something on a rag, whatever. Takes JonBenet out. She's not screaming. He gets her down the hall, down to the first floor. You know what's on the first floor? A lot of doors that aren't alarmed. A lot of doors. And there's big windows. If you want to get that child out of there to enjoy, to rape, and eventually probably murder, you're going to leave the house by the easiest method possible. And if nobody saw you coming down the stairs with her, you can just run out the darn door. That's what you're going to do. What aren't you going to do? Go into a basement. What for? Nobody's awake. Nobody's out there. You're going to go into a small basement room. What? So you can attack her down there. But no, that's not what they're claiming. They're saying he's taking her out the window. He's going to put a suitcase up and try to climb out the window with her, or even put her in the suitcase and shove the suitcase through the window. This is a bunch of shenanigans that make no sense for any stranger to go through. Oh, but wait. Along with all of that, a stranger who does not know the Ramseys, knows little about them, stops to write a long ransom note with all the intimate details of their lives in it. That sounds a lot like them. What the heck? Who is going to do that? What complete stranger is going to waste his time doing that if his purpose is to take JonBenet away to sexually assault her? It's ridiculous. So if it's a stranger, it makes no sense at all that he then picked this house, this child under these circumstances. acted the way he did in the house and then left a ransom note. None of that matches a complete stranger. Now, let's say the DNA does one day match a stranger. Let's say it does. So here would be the issue. How did we have what they would have to prove that DNA couldn't have gotten there some other way through, as I said, touch DNA travels. Somebody could have touched something and it got there. They would have to prove there was no innocent way that touch DNA could have gotten onto JonBenet Ramsey. They would have to prove that. How do they prove that? Well, that's a tricky thing. There are people who've claimed, oh, I did it. And of course, it doesn't match them. And they would have to have been in the neighborhood. So the first thing you're going to have to find out with touch DNA is if the guy was even present in that location, that he wasn't completely out of state, that something's not quite correct with the DNA that's there. Who is this guy that they suddenly found? Was he a child sex predator or is he just a regular fellow? And if he is in the location, in the area, if he isn't a sex predator, are you going to say, well, the mailman did it because the mailman touched something and that touch DNA traveled on? So it would be extraordinarily difficult to prove unless you have exactly. You literally would have to have a child sex predator who was in the area, and then he would have to confess and give up information that nobody else knew, that kind of thing. And I'm going to say that's just not going to happen. Why? Because again, the DNA does not match anybody in the Ramsey circle. The DNA would have to be a stranger, and no stranger would commit the crime the way the crime went down. It makes no sense. So no matter what John Ramsey tries to drum up in all the media, I can't find that the touch DNA is particularly relevant to the crime. If one day it turns out to be, so be it. I'll say, well, I'm surprised. My apologies. But at the moment, I cannot see any relevance. And I think that's why the case has gone, quote, unsolved for many, many years, because the touch DNA does not actually eliminate the family from being involved in what happened to JonBenet. It does not. Because the family did have touch DNA all around. But their touch DNA should be there anyway, which is why you can't accuse them of doing anything from the touch DNA. Again, it's not semen. If there was semen with JonBenet and it matched John or Burke, that would be a problem. That would be absolute. That would be an arrest right there. However, when it's not necessarily a sexual homicide that happened then or a sexual assault that happened at that time, the family's DNA is meaningless when it's touch DNA. But that doesn't mean they couldn't have committed the crime, or one of them couldn't have committed the crime, or that somebody couldn't have covered up the crime. So this constant, the DNA proves that the Ramseys were not involved is not so. And that they were excluded as suspects by certain people in law enforcement it should be, that's just completely wrong. That should not have happened. Very similar to the Madeleine McCann case. I'm not saying the Ramseys are guilty. I'm not saying the McCanns are guilty. What I'm saying is you can't, in either one of those cases, you cannot exclude them. You cannot. They were there. The child died when they were around. And there's no evidence in either case, any proof of an outside person in the house of the Ramseys or in the flat of the McCanns. No proof. Therefore, if you're going to do a proper investigation, everyone should remain a suspect. Okay, those are my thoughts on the DNA. I hope that clears things up, because this is just driving me nuts and people keep saying, but what about the DNA? Well, that's about the DNA. Okay, thank you for being here. Again, if you are new to the channel, please do like and subscribe. Check my playlists. I got a lot of cases on my playlist. I don't just focus on the Ramseys and the McCanns. I've got 600 videos. So if you're interested in a particular case, you might find it there. And also you can go to the search engine in YouTube and put in Profiler Pat Brown and the case you're interested in and see if I've already done an analysis. My channel is an educational channel. of criminal profiling, crime scene analysis, and logical thinking. Thank you for being here. Bye.